One Short Port Podcast. This is a special Multitap episode where we go ahead and bring some other people on the show to talk about a specific topic they are experienced in. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about collecting games kind of on a budget. Between a lot of people getting involved with the retro game scene and people making YouTube videos about it and stuff and like spreading the knowledge. A lot of these games have really come in high demand, and game collecting has gotten a little expensive, but there are ways to kind of collect without spending a ton of money, or even if you're not collecting, if you're just trying to look for older games. So I went ahead and decided to bring on Keith today to our podcast from the KeithShizuo channel. Keith is a game reviewer, and he also does musical parodies as well related around games. But the main reason I want to bring him on is because he has a series called the Game Pickup series, and this is about his weekly purchases of games and what he ends up buying and basically what he plans to do with those games. So hey, how are you doing today, Keith?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. How you doing yourself?
Doing good, thanks.
That's good.
So you're kind of, I would say you're like a budget focused collector. It seems like you really pay attention to price as you're purchasing things. Do you feel that's accurate for you, or?
Oh, definitely. Very thrifty is how I describe it. In fact, like often when I'm showing people my collection, one of the biggest brags I've got in it before I really like talk about like the games I've got, it's like, hey, I spent this little on this much.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, the price of the games I collect very much factors into what I got. Yeah.
So, and you saying that you have like a collection, I would assume that you identify yourself as a game collector then, right?
Yes, I would. It's pretty much my primary hobby at the moment. Um,
Okay.
I wouldn't say I'm so much of a player these days, although I have been playing a bit recently. But it's just because like various circumstances have meant that I don't have the chance to play games very much, well, as much anymore. And but like I spend a lot more time, hunting for games than I do end up playing them. So yeah, game collector. Very much so.
Which is kind of actually interesting in terms of, you not playing the games as much. Is it in particularly collecting games versus other things? Is it just the interest in the media in particular, or is there particular reasons why you go for games versus, other places you might collect if you're not playing those games?
Um, well, I don't. There's nothing else that I really collect apart from
Hmm.
video games. I mean, I collect a little bit like of toys and that of like slightly interesting things to me, but not really seriously like I do with video games. But like the reason why I don't play them so much at all, part of it is actually that I've gotten to that point. You know that old meme that was going around a couple of years ago where it's like, you have a picture of a girl's closet and like it's filled to the brim with clothes and it's just got the quote, I have nothing to wear. And then below
Yeah.
that, there's a shelf full of like 360 games and it's like, I have nothing to play. It's
Yeah.
kind of gotten to like that point where I'm just too spoiled for choice. I can't choose anything anymore. I actually played a lot more when I had a lot less.
I definitely have like a backlog of like 500 plus games at this point of
Oh,
things I've
but
looked at.
I passed 500 in my backlog like last year, man.
So I think both of us experience this, or we've kind of built up these large collection of games to the point that in some ways I imagine you feel the same. There's a good chance that you'll never play any of these some of these games at some point. So when did you really start feeling like you were building a collection? Still, really start like budget hunting for games? Like around what time that was that, and what kind of led to it?
Well, it all actually started, to go back to the very beginning of the story, it would be with the Nostalgia Critic back in around about 2011, 2012-ish. Do you know the Nostalgia Critic?
I recognize the name, and I think I can see his face in my mind. I've never watched any of his videos.
Yeah, he's a movie reviewer. His like trademark outfit is a black suit jacket with a white t-shirt, red tie, black
Mhm,
cap, beard, glasses. Yeah, nostalgic.
mhm.
He was really big back then. Now he's kind of Not not as revered as he once was for various reasons, but yeah, no, it's beyond the scope of this. But anyway, so he had a crossover with a small internet personality. You may have heard of him, I don't know, but he's known as the Angry Video Game Nerd, or
Yes, yes.
AVGN. Oh, you are
Mhm.
familiar. Oh, that's good. That makes this easy.
Yes.
But anyway, so yeah, he had his crossover with him, and that was the first time I'd ever really seen the AVGN. Yeah, it would
Mhm,
have been in
mhm,
his crossover video from early in his career. And after that, I just like I found the crossover funny, so I started looking at the angry video game nerd stuff, and I was like looking at this these games that he's got, and I'm like, wow, these really cool old games out there,
mhm,
and they're cheaper than the current games. I want to get me some of that, and like to give you an idea of like what my gaming knowledge was back when I first started watching the AVGN. I
mhm.
thought the Sega Genesis was the sequel to the Sega Mega Drive.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. And part of the reason for that is that we had an old Mega Drive. It was broken and busted.
Uh-huh.
I never had it working. But and I just don't have it today, but I had a Mega Drive and I assumed the Genesis, because he had a Model 1 in his videos, was a different thing.
Mhm, mhm.
I also thought that the Nintoaster was an actual console. I didn't get that it was supposed to be a toaster.
Oh, okay.
So so
Interesting.
yeah, that tells you like just like
Yeah.
how I knew absolutely nothing about the retro scene back then, but I
Mhm.
was seeing
Yeah.
him play these games. I was like, yeah, I kind of want to get into that. My family had a PS2. This was about halfway through the PS3's generation,
Yeah, yeah.
but we had a PS2. Video games were never something particularly big we grew up on. I think we didn't have one until maybe 2006. We didn't have anything like at all. Then we got some DSs. So yeah, didn't really grow up with video games. But yeah, so I started buying up a couple cheap PS2 games that I could find. And then the first big find happened on eBay, where I found a local auction for an Xbox.
Hmm.
Original Xbox, two Duke controllers, started at 99 cents.
Oh, wow.
And that's the price I wanted at. So yeah, I got this perfectly functional working Xbox for $1. And it was about an hour's bike ride away. Back in then, I rode the bike a lot, so that was not
Mhm.
really all that much for me. So I rode out. I think I managed to get one or two games with it, but they didn't work. So I ended up buying a copy of the first game would have been Medal of Honor: Rising Sun that I bought for $5 from a Game Traders, because it was the only decent game that was like $5 that I could test it on.
Mhm.
Uh, and yet, it's kind of like from that moment on, it was like it's kind of I've been bitten by the bug. So that was really my first deal, and ever since I've just wanted more deals, and I've never been able to pay the full amount for the games because I know those deals are out there. I can get because here's the thing: about a year later, I got another Xbox on auction for $1. So like, I know this is repeatable. It wasn't a fluke.
Yeah. That's actually, I find that really interesting because, but it sounds like you had kind of a aha moment and started.
That was in terms of like the price of games and buying stuff cheaply and
Yeah,
knowing
yeah.
that like I was going to be thrifty. I wasn't going to spend top dollar. In terms of the gradual build of my collection, I might actually send you some pictures so you can put them in the show notes or the video version of this
Mhm.
podcast if there is one. But if you look in the background of my YouTube videos, you can see my collection grow over the years. And you can see back when I posted my first video in, I think, 2014, the first
Mhm.
gaming video, that video had been filmed 12 months prior. And you can see that my entire PS2 and Xbox collection uh, amounted to about 15 games that I had between two
Oh, wow.
bookends on top of my
Yeah.
TV. And that's the second phase of my collection. And then a couple years later, it had grown to fill up nearly two whole 40 DVD shelf stacks, plus some plus some PS1 games. Back then, PS1 was actually my biggest collection, which is kind of
Yeah, yeah.
crazy to think about, like considering how uncommon it is to find. Uh,
Mhm.
in comparison. And
Yeah.
then you jump ahead like 2 years to 2016, and it's just an entire fucking wall. It's great. It gets crazy at that point. I'll give you the images so people can, so you can.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I'll include those in. A little background on kind of how I built my collection is definitely a lot more long term. Something I kind of over time kind of figured out is when I was growing up, I never viewed a console as dead. per se. So I started with a Game Boy, Nintendo 64, and then from there kind of got a PlayStation. And I, for the most part, I got pretty much every console at some point. Even though it'd be like, hey, I got the original Xbox, after the Xbox 360 came out and things like that. But I kind of never stopped playing or buying for old systems. I got my first console, I was like 5 or something, so it was like 1995. And so I kept buying like Nintendo 64 games like well into like the 2000s and things like that. And it was kind of interesting, and I think kind of different from what a lot of the people got in from, is like mine was like a consistent build up over my entire life, basically, where I feel like a lot of other people, like in your case, it sounds like there's like a lot of outside influence in terms of like YouTubers and stuff that kind of brought that, buying old
Mm.
games in. But to me, it's like it was almost kind of weird seeing the retro scene at some point, because to me those games never went away really. um,
Well,
they just were always there. But I didn't have an NES or Super Nintendo, so like when people started making YouTube videos, and they're like people probably our age at this point back then, making YouTube videos about their favorite games when they were kids, was definitely like NES and Super Nintendo focused.
that's very interesting because it's kind of like we've kind of started from very opposite points, but with the same result when you think about it. Because
Yeah,
you never saw a system as dead because you had them already and you just like never got rid of them. Whereas
yeah,
with me, I never had anything and just got the old stuff because it was dead.
yeah.
But because of that, I've never bought current gen stuff. Like I've actually, with the exception of the Wii U, which I got my parents to buy me for Christmas because I
Mhm.
wanted Splatoon, and I don't regret that. So I'm one of the few people who don't regret buying the Wii U. But
I like my Wii U too, so
the way I justify it when I talk to my friends, they're like, "Oh, why didn't you like have new games? Why don't you buy a PS4? It's not that much." It's like, well, because like in Australia, I can buy a new game for $100. Or
Mhm.
for that same amount of money, I can go out and I can buy 30 PS2 games. And like those games, they're going to be just as fun as like one single random PS4 game. I mean, they're still good games.
I go dollar game shopping a lot of times, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
like trying to find a super cheap game. And unfortunately, I like having cases, so that makes it a little more difficult. But if you can get like disc only versions of, or not versions, but disc only games, that definitely is like a huge savings
No.
on that.
It's actually,
Um,
we can probably touch on this a bit later, but it's actually rather difficult to get disc only stuff in Australia. It's because like most places, like if it doesn't have a case, it gets chucked.
oh, really? The
Yeah.
game itself just gets tossed?
Yeah, up until very, very recently, the only retailer that really accepted disc only games of anything that was like older than 360,
Hmm.
yeah, they just did not offer any disc stuff. They just didn't take it. Nowhere
Wow.
took it. And yeah, only recently did they do it, but even then, their prices aren't the best, so whatever. But yeah,
In the US, it's actually the opposite. Cases usually get thrown away. So people will trade their games in, and GameStop doesn't want to keep those cases on hand because that takes up space and inventory.
oh, I've heard about terrible stuff like that, like
Yeah,
them opening like sealed games, throwing away the case and manual, and then selling them as used because that's a higher profit margin for them by some.
you'd see some like YouTube channels, people going dumpster diving behind GameStops and like getting tons and tons of cases of games.
Oh yeah, I've seen a couple of those a couple years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting that they actually kept cases down in Australia, or like literally would not sell it without a case.
Well, no,
It's kind of
well, I mean, it's not that they
different.
won't sell it without the case; it's just they won't buy it in the first place. So you can find disc only stuff on eBay, but even then, like you
Yeah,
got when you get past the shipping and all that, you're not saving any money. There's no point. But
yeah.
like, yeah, just nowhere bought in like discs. So like offloading discs can be like really hard sometimes.
One quick thing to note here is that like prices are changing all the time, and they greatly vary per platform. But the general trend seems to be that a lot of these games are going up in value. And this is especially true for any system that's like basically a pre 7th generation console, like anything before the 360, PS3, and the Wii. So if you're looking for things like Nintendo 64 games, GameCube games, Dreamcast games, it can be difficult to find a good deal.
I think we've gotten to the point where we're not trading between like people who used to own these uh, games like,
Mhm.
the first owners and collectors. We're now looking at a market where it's collectors buying off collectors.
That
You
sounds
know,
right, yeah.
and anybody who did have these from the old days, is aware that there's some value in them, and they take them to, a pawn shop rather than trying to, like, donate them.
So, one thing I do want to kind of talk about at this point is kind of where we look, where we're buying games today. Me and you, and one of the probably one of the most common complaints I hear from a lot of my friends and people I talk to about game collecting in general is just how expensive things have gotten. Um, I really had started noticing things getting pretty expensive in like 2008 and 2010 ish, probably.
That was a little bit before my collecting time. Yeah, I would have still been in primary school then, so just when I was getting my first ever game console.
Okay, yeah, I was 2008. I was 18 years old, just graduated high school. Had no money as well, which is kind of part of why I ended up buying $5 GameCube games all the time. Um, but yeah, so today PlayStation 2 seems like a good place to still be based off what you've been saying. I've definitely seen cheaper PS2 games here. I feel like I don't find ridiculously cheap PS2 games anymore here in the US. Like usually it's at least $5 to $10 for a game, US dollars. So where I'm usually looking right now is the Wii, Xbox 360, PS3, DS, platforms like that. DS maybe not so much. Because those are kind of like the last gen systems. They're also about to be the last gen systems, I guess,
Mm.
like 2 generations ago. And that's really been my focus. I recently got like Batman: The Brave and the Bold for like $3, I think, for the Wii, which is like a way
Ooh.
forward beat 'em up, which is pretty cool. Um, and one thing that I kind of noticed when watching your pickup videos is I think we aim for a lot of similar types of games. I think a big part of buying games on the cheap is having an open mind about games.
Yeah.
One of the games that you showed off that really caught my eye was Brave, like based off the movie Brave.
When it comes to collecting, you shouldn't really limit yourself to those, marquee top shelf titles,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of good stuff in, the bottom of the bin, kind of more mediocre,
Hmm, hmm,
titles like movie license stuff.
hmm.
And Brave is a brilliant example of that, because that's a game that nobody would really think about. Now, when we're talking about Brave, we're talking about the Disney movie Brave, the one with the Scottish girl, bears, that sort of thing. If you
Hmm.
haven't seen it, then yeah, it's in the same series as like Tangled and Frozen and all those. But you pick up a game like that and you think, oh, it's going to be some, like, basic
Yeah.
platformer, some of that, or like, weird mini game thing. No, it's a twin stick shooter.
Hmm.
It's one where, you run with the D-pad, and no, so you run with the nunchuck, you shoot with the D-pad in the direction you want to go, Smash TV style. There's a whole power-up system and RPGs, level select, all that. It's a really full-feature game, and I got that game for $3.
Yeah.
You know, so you shouldn't be looking at, like, not every single game is Fire Emblem or
Mhm.
Pokemon or you know uh, Stubbs the Zombie. Like, there's a lot of good stuff to be found in the whole library of these systems.
And I think one thing to keep in mind when you're buying these is because they're so cheap these days, it's really like when you see a game like Brave, it's
Mm.
really easy to take a risk on that. Like it may be complete garbage when you buy it,
Oh yeah, well,
but
I've got a little system that I developed in university, and I
mm.
call it my fuck it point.
Okay.
And yeah, so basically what that means is, like, I realized when I was at uni that, like, hey, after class, I'm going down to the convenience store on campus or whatever it is, and I'm spending $3.60 on Coke.
Mhm.
That's Coca Cola,
Yeah,
before
yeah.
any of you start to be funny. But yeah, so I buy that and I spend $3.60. I'm like, I'm just gonna drink this in like 10 minutes and it's going
Mhm.
to be gone. And, like, I spent $3.60 on that. So, and, like, yeah, I won't spend, $3 on a video game. So I just thought, okay, any game that's like $2 or under, fuck it, I'll grab it.
Yeah.
It's my fuck it point. Recently, like, because I'm a bit better for money,
Mhm.
that amount has risen to $3, because that's the most common price you see
Mhm.
a lot of PS2 games at, and like other similar systems. But yeah, so literally, I look at it, it's like if it's anywhere resembling the possibility of some sort of entertainment value, I just go, yeah, screw it, because there's a second system that I use when I'm collecting my games, and that is I very rarely spend more on a game than I could make back by reselling it.
Hmm.
So when I'm out there, I'm on, I'm looking at games and all that. I'm checking eBay, I'm checking the CEX trading websites, which we'll talk about more in a minute. But yeah, I'm checking the value of these games, and yeah, so I generally try and make sure I can make at least about 30 to 40% more back if I don't like the game. Um, so that way, there's a lot less risk in the money I am spending.
Hmm.
Of course, $2 doesn't matter. Screw it.
Yeah.
Like if I lose $2, I lose $2. That doesn't matter to me. Like I piss that away on Coke. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I
So yeah,
kind of used it actually for a while to kind of dissuade me from getting fast food as much. So I'd be like, every time I'd go to buy fast food, I'd basically in my mind give myself $5. Like, if you don't go do this, I'll let you just go buy a video game for $5 because that's how much it's going to cost to get fast food. Um,
now you see, I would use that. The problem is, I know I'm just gonna buy the game anyway
yeah,
if it's
yeah.
that cheap. Like, oh, I had a real, like, just like deviating a bit. I had a real kind of sticker shock moment the other week
Mhm.
when I was looking at my bank statement on my phone, like the app. It was like, oh, check what you spent this month. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, check that, and I'm like, how in the hell in 1 month did I spend $300 on fast food? I'm
Jesus.
like,
Yeah.
oh dear, I need to really take a look at some life decisions I've made. I'm like, that's a whole Dreamcast right there that I've spent
Yeah.
on Maccas.
It's easy, like, when you're doing
But
in little bits like that, but that's also, like, what's kinda appealing about, cutting it out, and, trying to offer that trade-off. Yeah, and one other thing I kinda wanna also present when, trying to looking at games and buying them. I think, and I don't know how you feel about, like, your gaming opinions, Keith, but, one of the things that kinda follows me around, and I've been trying to get away from this over the years, is, people say I have bad opinions, which I get it. um, but what I really have kind of figured out, I think, over the last 5 years, is that I typically just have I value different things in games. So a lot of times I don't value things like polish as much. So like if you get like a 3D, AAA game that is, it doesn't really have any new ideas in it, but it's just, a really good third person shooter, something like that. I typically de-emphasize those games more when I look at
yeah,
them, and focus on things that have like quality ideas, or aim for things that typically aren't the typical implementation you see and things like that.
that is exactly what I was talking about before when I was talking about the mediocrity and like the mid-level stuff,
Mhm.
um, especially with the PS2 and somewhat with the Xbox as well. That's where like a lot of the most interesting stuff is, in the not necessarily too polished area, but like like that really is some of the more interesting and cheap stuff to collect.
Yeah. And sometimes you'll be surprised by what is actually cheap. Like, I got Metal Saga recently for the PS2, which is like a part of the Metal Max series. And it was like a JRPG published by Atlas on the PS2. And I was like, oh God, this is going to be expensive. And come to find out, it was like $15 new.
Oh yeah, I think a lot of the Atlas stuff has started to crash recently because people realize the name. It doesn't quite mean as much as they used to think it
Mhm.
did. It used to be like every time an Atlas game would come out, people would buy two
Yeah.
copies,
Yeah.
one to keep and one to sell later. But now it's like, yeah, I can find like half the Atlas stuff for like $10.
Yeah.
Like I can see it on the shelf and I'll leave it there because I know I can't resell it. Now, something you said earlier, it's like when you said a lot of your friends are complaining about the pricing
Mhm.
of game collecting. Now, there are exceptions to this, obviously, but at the end of the day, the best advice that I can give when it comes to, collecting games, if you don't want to spend money, is that video game collecting is as expensive as you want it to be. And what I mean by that is that, like, if you have enough patience, you can get just about anything you want at any price that you want. because it used to be that it was extremely rare that I would spend more than $5 on a game. In fact, only maybe last year did I start regularly going over to the 6 and up to the $10 mark. And even though then those have to be like relatively like high dollar games, like
Mhm.
I'd spend $10 on like a $30 game. Like that's the disparity I need. I wouldn't spend 10 on a $20 game. It needs to be a lot in there.
Yeah.
But after about 5 years of collecting, I had a good 200 or 300 titles, probably even more than that if you take to get into consideration all those, with some high dollar stuff in there. And I'd sold off quite a bit, and I think actually to about 2017, my collection was actually in profit because of the reselling I'd done. Because um, this hobby for me, as I said, it's especially now less about playing, but it's about the thrill of the hunt.
Mhm.
And if you're willing to, go out to the flea markets, go every other day to the op shops around your house just while you're doing other things, check the right places online and like build up a rapport with sellers and that sort of thing. At the end of the day, you can get just about whatever you want, for whatever price you want if you're just willing to wait. The two examples that I use often, the two anecdotes, is like one time I was looking through game traders, just like through the normal Xbox games, and I saw Outrun 2006 on Xbox. Oh, I know that's a
Mhm.
pretty valuable game. That's like in the trilogy of like the three valuable games. Operation Genesis, Stubbs the Zombie, and what's Outrun.
Mhm.
And I'd pick it up, and I'm like, does that sticker really say $9? Is this a complete copy for $9? And it's like, yeah, I mean, I'd seen that game plenty of times. I could have dropped $50 on that years ago. But if you wait, eventually, like the stuff will come to you. Now, it becomes a little bit more difficult when you get to stuff like cartridge collecting, where the market isn't like like you're just gonna have to raise your cash bar
Yeah, yeah.
when if you want to collect in that. But it's a different market. But if you want to collect, especially PS2, PS1, Xbox, Wii, and coming in now 360, PS3, game collecting is ultimately as cheap as your patience can hold out. And if you're willing to just build up slow, and yeah, like you can get pretty much everything you want.
So one thing I don't have a lot of experience with is kind of buying and selling games. I pretty much buy games to keep them. Sometimes I'll see a good deal on a game that I know is technically worth more, but then I'm like, will I play this game? Is the question. And if the answer is no, even though it looks like a deal, I'll pretty much pass on it. But on your side of things, you actually buy to sell a lot of times. And kind of one thing that I think you just mentioned earlier, like, hey, cartridge collecting, you have to kind of raise your bar. But with like PS2 collecting, you don't have to. Um, you can kind of with the kind of model you've shown in some of your videos, build upon a PS2 collection to eventually get to a cartridge game. So one of the videos I saw from you initially that I really liked was you had a video where like, I'm gonna get a copy of Shadow Colossus for, I forget how much was it. Was it $20 Australian? Is how much?
That game, Shadow of the Colossus, typically retails in Australia for about 50, $60.
50, 60. Okay.
And I wanted to try and get it for $1.
Mhm.
Now, you're going to have to be a pretty damn good haggler to get that in any normal circumstances. I had realized, after these years of collecting that, like, you know what? If I just started with a low value, like I know enough about the games around me that
Mhm.
I can make enough money that I reckon I could start with $1 and build up to something really expensive. And I asked on my YouTube channel in the comments, hey, this is an idea. I'm thinking of doing it. What do you reckon I should trade up to? Some people thought I should go up for a console, and that's what I was thinking at one point. I was thinking of actually going for a pink PS2 console
Okay, yeah. I have one.
because oh, it's a very nice looking one, isn't
Yeah.
it? Like Yeah, just something about that because I think they use like proper automotive paint on them or something, so like they just don't tarnish.
Yeah, I think there's, like, a whole line of consoles in Japan specifically. I don't know about all like, what they released here, but
I think the pink one used the same thing there, and they're all in like pristine condition. I don't
mhm.
know how, and I'm glad I didn't go for a pink console because I managed to find one cheaper,
Oh, nice.
about $50 as opposed to the regular 100 to $150 a couple months down the road. So that just goes to what I said before about patience.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, things will come to you if you're willing to look. But like I decided, so like at the end of it, I decided, okay, so a game that I've never seen low is Shadow of the Colossus because that in PAL territories it came out in a paper case. It automatically looks a lot more premium, and if
Mhm,
you want it in decent condition with the slip cover, with the manual, all that, it's not as easy to find. So you've probably got to go for eBay if you want to get a nice one so you can see the condition.
mhm.
So I thought, okay, I'll go for that, and I'll start with $1. And basically, what I did is I bought and sold a bunch of games, and I showed that on my YouTube channel in my like buy any game for $1 series. And within I think a month and a half, I was expecting it to go for 2 to 3 months, but within a month and a half, I had myself a pretty dang crispy copy of Shadow of the Colossus and $13 cash left over.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that, like, there's a couple times you limited yourself because you're like, "I got way too good of a deal. Like, I'm
Yeah,
not
that
going
that
to
actually
count this."
that was actually an issue because like once in the trading, like I found the Mass Effect trilogy for PS3 for $3, I think it was at Salvos. Literally, I got there just as they were putting it on the shelf, and like the old lady was asking the other old lady who was the manager, "Oh, how much do we put on the games?" And I'm like, "Well, however much you put on it, I think I'll take that." I didn't really know how much it was worth, but I knew that it would probably be worth something. And like, oh
Mhm.
well, $3 is what we normally do, so I'll give you $3. And I was like, okay. And then I looked online. And I'm like, whoa, okay, I could sell this game for $60 if I wanted to,
Yeah, yeah.
and I did. So like, I was like, you know what, like that one trade there, that could have been my Shadow of the Colossus if I wanted it to be. So I decided, okay,
Yeah.
I'm not going to count that. But there's another game that I happened to buy off screen earlier in the day that would be a more decent trade. So I'll do that. And like, yeah, I got it. So like, it just goes to show, yeah, if you're patient, and especially if you know how to resell, if you know what to look for,
Yeah.
and if you're interested in this hobby and in games, you will accrue that knowledge.
So is it looking for, like, big IP and things series that people know like, or
Not necessarily. I mean, you try making a bunch of money off like Halo or Ratchet and Clank, you're not going to be able to
Mhm,
do it because those games, they're big, they're well loved, but they're common.
mhm.
And it's collecting PS2 isn't like collecting NES, where like say with NES, you've got Contra. It's a marquee NES title. Everybody wants that. It sells
Yeah.
high, but it's also common as all hell. Like they
Mhm.
made a lot of Contras, they sold a lot of Contras.
Yeah.
With PS2, the common as hell stuff, even if it's a big IP, even if it's a well loved game like, say, Ratchet and Clank or Sly Cooper 1, that one's probably a little bit more valuable, or Jack and Daxter.
Mhm.
These ones sold a lot that, even though everybody's got a copy, uh, they're very low value. So it's not
Yeah.
always about for the big IP. It's actually more often not looking at this very specific little middle ground. It's the kind of stuff, especially in the PAL market. We had this publisher called 505 Games. I don't know if
Yes, I know of them.
they're in America as well.
They're very easy to recognize because a lot of Japanese games that only got localized in PAL territories,
Yeah.
were localized by 505 Games, and then either they came out through a different publisher here or they just didn't come out at all.
Yeah. Now, those are the kind of games where like they're very weird because they had low production runs. Not a lot of people had them,
Mhm.
but they're kind of kooky. They're kind of they're the interesting stuff.
A lot of them are actually, based off or a lot of them come from the Simple series, if you're aware of that from
Yes, yes,
Japan,
yes. I
yeah.
am aware of the simple series, but at the same time, they generally had someone who was like, graphic design is my passion, who
Mhm.
was like designing the covers,
Yeah.
and like yeah, so they don't look particularly interesting, but like yeah, they are. and like, being able to recognize just the right amount of cheapness in a cover to where the game inside is probably interesting and therefore uh, rare is
Mhm.
yeah, it's good. Also stuff like arcade ports, stuff like Tengai, that's always really good. That's actually probably my biggest value game find that I've ever had. It was at a school fete. They had a stack of two games there. They wanted $1 a piece. They were
Mhm.
15. I said, I'll give you $10 for the stack. They said, okay. And I grabbed those. And then I was looking through the pile. I was like, yeah, okay, I can sell that for $10. I can sell that for $2. I'll keep that. Ooh, what's this game? Ten Guy. Never heard of this. Oh, it's a shooter. Let me just quickly go on eBay. What? $90? Yeah, so
From
I think it's
PS2, you
now
said?
PS2. Yeah, and that game trades for like 110 these days. But yeah, I got it for 75 cents. But like now, that's an example of me not knowing what I'm looking for.
I've
Yeah.
definitely seen, like, especially on the Wii, there was a lot of stuff that, like, got localized and just got a weird generic box art.
Mm, mm,
Like, Monkey King or whatever has, like, a really awful looking box art, but it's actually a
yeah.
decent shooter. So,
Yeah. Now, of course, there are also the bigger IPs, as you're saying. Some of them are worth a lot, but it's mainly the stuff like Ico, Shadow of the Colossus,
mm,
the bigger the RPGs, but not stuff like Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy on PS2 over here, that is bargain basement,
yeah.
scraps. Same thing almost with Kingdom Hearts. It's got a little bit more, a tiny bit more value to it. But it's the unknown RPGs like Artanelico and Magna Carta
Mm,
and that
mm,
sort of thing. Those are both games that I've found for just a couple of bucks. Go for big money. Namco compilations, Capcom compilations, that sort of thing. And these are often, at some stores, even some like stores that tend to be pretty savvy, they'll bundle those in with just the cheap stuff. And yeah, if you just got the right eye for it, you can pick it out, you know.
How long do you think it took you to kind of develop the eye for that kind of thing? Was it a multi-year process? Was it something that you already, I mean, you came into this not really having, it sounds like, a great knowledge of video games. So how long did it
Oh
take
yeah,
you to
thinking
build that?
the Genesis was the sequel to the Mega Drive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back then, I wouldn't have been able to tell you an N64 from the Super Nintendo. I really wouldn't have if it wasn't written on there. But it's still developing, frankly. Like any skill, like they say, it
Mhm.
takes 30 years of hard work to become a master at anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm always learning something new. The market is changing always in subtle, different ways. There are
Mhm.
always new opportunities to buy and sell around, so you got to learn it. And I think I really started getting it maybe that's about 4 years ago. It really started clicking. 4 or 5 years ago. That's when I
Okay.
really started to be able to pick up on what was worth my time and what wasn't. Before then, it was a slow process of just, checking up absolutely everything I found,
Yeah.
seeing what it was, and working on building a collection that way. And back in those days, I didn't have as many shops available to me as I did now. Back in the day, like I had a couple op shops, and I actually have really bad social anxiety.
Mm.
So for the first couple of years of my collecting, I couldn't even walk into op shops because I was just that bad with new places.
Yeah.
So, but once I managed to get in there, um, yeah, I was able to find all the op shops, work out which ones were the best for gaming, and there were only about five in total, and only two of those were particularly good.
Mm.
But yeah,
S-
these days there's at least four around here which often have something. CEX is a relatively recent thing in Australia that's
mm.
been really helpful, and we'll probably talk about that in a sec. But yeah, it's the market around you is always changing, and not just the online buying and selling market, but just like op shops, thrift stores, that sort of thing. It's
Yeah.
always changing. They're always changing managers who always change how they price stuff, what they buy in, what they throw
Mm.
away, and you just got to stay on top of that and let your knowledge build with it.
So you mentioned a few places where you're doing a lot of these transactions. Is there any places that you prefer to, like, buy or sell depending on location? Like, are there stores that are better for selling versus ones that are better for buying games and things like that? Or is it pretty much just you check each, marketplace and see what works best for each game?
Well, it used to be back in the day, selling was eBay.
Mm,
Trade in credit, as I said, you barely got anything. Like
mm,
Game Traders is the dominant chain retro store in
mhm,
Australia. And unfortunately, they're a decentralized franchise. And what that means is, well, that's probably a nonsense term, but it's one that makes sense to me. In that every franchise, while they have the same name, they have the same decor, the same uniforms,
mhm.
they operate completely independently. There's no
Gotcha.
cross ordering between stores. There's no collated price chart. They all decide on their own prices. There's no delivery until very, very recently. Some of them open independent delivery. But basically, it's one of those franchises where you just pay for the name. That's all it is. And
Gotcha.
this is good for some things when it comes to, because some places, obviously, they'll give you more for credit, but in general, they just don't give you anything because they're the only name out there. You know,
Yeah.
if you're going to trade to somewhere, you're going to trade to them until very
Mhm,
recently, but we'll get to that. And one of the positive things about having decentralization is that every so often, as I said, with that, you know, uh, Outrun 2006,
mhm,
someone's asleep at the wheel when they're buying the games in. They
mhm.
don't know what they're looking for. They get it really cheap, and you yoink that back up. so, so there are positives and negatives. Negatives is that, like, because they're the only ones, they tend to, if they price something high, it ain't going to come back down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, other places like now op shops, of course, you'd call it thrift store. We don't have a Goodwill per se, like you Americans do. A
Mhm.
Goodwill, as I believe, that's like an American one where like they pay the employees and they're an actual business. They just take donations and they sell them.
Yes.
Over here, it's all run by non-profits, op
Mm,
shops. You
gotcha.
don't have any for-profit opportunity shops. That would be weird over here. Even I find the idea of a Goodwill a bit weird. But yeah,
It's the
it's
American way, don't worry about it.
yeah, yeah. It's like, yeah, give us free shit and we'll make money off it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but now over here, it's all run by the Salvation Army, the St. Vincent de Paul Society, or Vinnies, uh,
Mhm.
uh, Anglicare, all these mostly religious organizations, not always.
Okay.
In these places, some of them, they always priced their games at around $2 back in the day. Those are the ones you want
Mhm.
to hit, the ones that actually take the stuff in and they put it, and they don't look for scratches. If they look for scratches, you're not going to find that much on the shelf, because at
Gotcha.
the end of the day, what an old lady looks at a game and says, "Oh, that's a scratch," that's going to play fine in a PS2, like most of the time, or
Yeah.
it just needs a little buffing. If they're looking for scratches, they're going to throw away stuff that works perfectly fine. It's happened before. I've gone dumpster diving outside those places where I shouldn't have, and I found perfectly working console. I found a working PS2. I threw it in the
Mhm.
dumpster. So yeah, that's an unfortunate reality that we're gonna have to live with. But yeah, so there are places, other ones, they price everything at $5, nothing below. That's too much for just random games. Now there's heaps
Yeah.
of stuff you can find, which would be a deal at $5, but for the random like game, like five is too much. So,
Gotcha.
and of course, as I said, it fluctuates and like it changes all the time. Now, the two main retail places that I go to buy and sell these games, which are relatively recent developments, are Cash Converters, which is another
Mhm.
decentralized franchise, and CEX, which is a centralized franchise. Now, we'll talk about Cash Converters first. Now, that operates just like a pawn shop. You can loan on possessions, you can
Mhm.
sell them to the store, you can buy from the store. I generally use that with bulk um, cheap stuff because I know that they will give me $1 or for some systems $2 per disc. And if I've
Gotcha.
got something a little bit more expensive, they'll give me a little bit more, but they're not going to give me less. So like if I got, that's actually that formed a very important link in the chain with my $1 uh, Shadow of the Colossus. The first trade I did was I spent my dollar on two 50-cent PS3 games from CEX.
Mhm.
So they were just like cheapo bargain basement, Dare iToy games or something like that.
Yeah.
I bought those. I traded them in to Cash Converters, $2 a piece. Turned $1 into $4, just like that. So yeah, so I use those as my reliable get rid of the bulk that I can't sell elsewhere.
Mhm.
And of course, I also love buying from them because they're decentralized. They often price their stock down really low. Sometimes they'll price something that isn't really worth much way high and it's not going to come down, whatever. But a lot of those times, like I've caught them slipping a lot of times. Now, CEX is a store that's exclusive to the UK and Australia.
Mhm.
It really started popping up about 5 years ago, and it has really shaken up the market in this area, because what happens is, as I said, it's centralized. They have a central game and movie database because they only trade in used media and hardware. So movies, games, computer bits and pieces. Um, and they have a list of all the values of all this, and it's updated every other month or so.
Gotcha.
But every time you take a game to the store, they will give you that amount that's on their list for that game, and you will buy it for that price. And you can order stuff online as well. So from any other location in Australia, I can order X game, which is on their website, and $3 extra for shipping, and it comes here. Now, there's good and bad in that. Now, the good is that it means that, like, if they say have one game I used to trade in a lot, Crash Team Racing on
Mhm.
PS2, they used to accept that game for $18 worth of trading credit. So if I found one for $5 out in the wild, I'm up $13. And
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
like I buy a lot of video games, so that credit might as well be cash because I can spend that on games.
Mhm.
And another benefit of that is if there's a game that they don't get in very often, they're not looking at the sales data. So, like, of course, now if a game is selling more often, then you want to raise the price.
Mhm.
But if a game just isn't getting traded in, which most of the time means it's rare, not always expensive, but rare. Say something like, what I just bought last night. I bought a copy of the Namco 50th Anniversary Arcade. That's a game
Okay.
that sells on eBay for about 25, retails for about 50. I paid $5 for that, and it's the first time I've ever seen that game
Oh,
listed
wow.
in uh, 4 years on their website. So
Mhm.
they never updated the price. And if you can snap it up quick enough, you can get some stuff really cheap. But
Mhm.
again, it's
Mhm.
all about perseverance. Now, the system I actually have with CEX, and I'm actually giving away a fairly big secret here. So anybody in the UK or Australia, you're going to be sniping deals from me, especially in Australia. And I did talk about this a bit in the $1 game challenge.
Mhm.
By the way, the $1 game challenge. I'm thinking about doing that again. I started doing like a season 2, but I kind of petered out. I don't know if I get
Mhm.
more interest on it, then I might start it up again.
I personally liked it a lot, but I like your pickup videos a lot too, so
So what I did is I went through it. It's taken me quite a while, and I'm still adding things to it to this day. But I went through the entire catalog that they've got on the CEX website, and they have a feature where you can put something on a wish list, where it
Mhm.
creates a separate sort of saved list, and it'll show you whether or not that game's in stock or not. Now you can't search through this list, but what it does do is it appears in there. So I went through the entire PS2 library, the entire Xbox library, GameCube. Um, in the UK, they also have PS1 and GBA. They don't do that
Mhm.
over here, unfortunately. But yeah, I went through the entire list and I added anything that could possibly be interesting to me that I might want to buy to this list: peripherals, games, anything. If it was at a price that was even vaguely like in a range where I'd want to buy that game, maybe if it came down a bit in future month, I added it to that list. And what I do is every single night I've done this without fail, because it's just so profitable and such a brilliant way to find games. I wait till about 6 o'clock. That's when all the shops shut, so I know that nothing else
Mhm.
is going to be added today to that list. I'll go onto that list. I'll hit page end on my keyboard. It'll scroll down. I'll hit load more, and I'll keep going until I've loaded the entire list on the screen. And then I'll hit Control F, and I'll type in the words to buy, because the words to buy only appear um, in a listing if it's in stock
Oh, okay.
and available to buy online. And then I'll just hit enter and I'll check through the entire list. And there's some stuff that's been on there for quite a while that I'm not paying that price for, but I'm waiting to see
Yeah.
if it goes down.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll just every night I'll cycle through that and I'll check a look at the number of how many instances of to buy. And if that number's gone up, then I know that there's something new there that
Mhm.
I have previously said to myself, I'd be interested in that. And I just look through that and I'll go, oh, Namco 50th anniversary arcade, add that to cart. Wireless Mad Catz PS2 controller, add that to cart. What's some other good finds I've had there? Robotech Battle Cry,
Okay.
PS2. $2. That's a $25 game. Add that to cart. I'll sell that and list it on eBay as soon as it gets here. And I'll hit buy. And I'll do that every single night. And I have gotten so much good stuff from that. I'm sure if you watch my pickup videos, you'll hear me say, oh, bought this from CEX. Most of
Yeah.
the time, it's from doing that.
When you said a bit earlier that you sell on eBay after that, are you mainly selling on eBay or do you also buy stuff from eBay as well?
I very rarely buy stuff from eBay.
Okay.
I used to buy back in the day. I bought quite a few import PS1 and GameCube disc only stuff
Mhm.
because there was a seller who used to start all their bids at 99 cents and would bundle packaging. So long as I bought enough, if I bought them at that 99-cent point, then I'd be able to get a whole bunch over.
Yeah.
I don't buy on eBay so much because basically eBay is what I use as my baseline for
Mhm.
price. Especially when I'm buying stuff out in the wild, I'll look on eBay. I'm like, okay, it says this game's worth $20. Price on it here is 7. That's just about enough for me to want to buy it, and I'll take a risk on it. If I like it, I keep it. If I don't like it, I sell it. But the thing is, like, if I happen to come across a really good deal on eBay,
Mhm.
and like no one's bidding on it, and I've got a chance, I'll go for it. But at the end of the day, like most of those listings is what I consider the baseline in my head, and
Mhm.
I don't pay the baseline.
Yeah.
So, like, because I wait and I use my patience, as I said before, and I find this stuff way cheaper a little bit down the line. And I've got
Mhm.
enough of a backlog that it doesn't bother me that I don't have Stubbs the Zombie. I don't need that right
Yeah.
now. I can wait until I find it for $5 at a garage sale or something. Now, there's one other online marketplace which I have bought from recently, but I don't like because it's very volatile, and that
Okay.
is the Facebook marketplace,
Oh, gotcha.
which is a
Okay.
relatively recent. I don't know. Do you have that in America?
Yeah, we do. I've never used it, but I do know some friends who use it.
There are deals to be had there. Make no mistake. There are
Mhm.
people who don't know what they have, and if you're the first person to message them and they're close enough, you've got it. I recently got a 29-inch Trinitron for $25.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, that's now my main light gun TV. I've gotten PSP for $60, but that wasn't a particularly good deal. And that's part of the reason why I don't like it. Is because I was originally supposed to buy a PSP 3000 from that guy in box, Lilac,
Mhm.
for $60. No, for $100 plus another console plus a bunch of games. I met him in the parking lot a couple days later. When we agreed, he said, "No, already sold that one."
Oh,
So it's like these people aren't as accountable as a store. They don't have policies that they have to
yeah.
follow. And so it's a lot more of a wild west. So if you want to try and face that, so when I said like, it's as expensive as you want it to be,
Mhm.
book is where I don't want it to be. That is not a market where I'm really willing to wade through.
Yeah.
Now, if you are willing to wade through it, you will eventually find some really good deals.
Yeah.
However, most of the time, what you're going to find is listing where it's like a whole stack of games. It's going to say $5 on it. You're going to think, oh, $5 for this stack of PS2 games. That's awesome. You're going to click it, and it's going to be one fee, and it's going to be a list of prices. One FIFA game there is going to be $5, and the rest are going to be 30.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, so that is just a bridge too far for me to regularly consider Facebook Marketplace. And it's the same thing with stuff like Craigslist. eBay is a lot
Mhm.
more formalized. It's had a lot more time to mature. The standards of what to expect is good, and it's really good as a baseline market. Now, if you are willing to pay these prices, if you have a good job, and you're not really into bragging about how cheap you got something, you just want to have it and collect it and put it on the shelf and slowly accrue it that way. Yeah, buy stuff at eBay prices. It's like there's no
Mhm.
shame in that. A lot of people say, "Oh, this seller's charging eBay prices, like at a flea market or something." And it's like, yeah, I get it that you don't find the deal. I hate that too when stuff is
Mhm.
individually priced based on eBay. But if you have the money to spend and you don't want to build up buy like huge volume really quick, eBay can still be a useful tool.
Do you have any other kind of future goals on terms of like things you think you're looking to collect?
Once upon a time, there was a fresh faced little high school Keith who was just entering this world of collecting, and he said to
Mhm.
himself, you know what I want to do? I want to complete NES collection. I want to complete N64 collection. I just want to find them all. It'll take ages, but I'll do that. However, now these days, collecting has just whittled me down. I've had to deal with the crap like, the 50 hertz PAL
Mhm.
conversions and all that. And, there's been the rising prices and the just sheer inability to get cartridge games, where that's actually a goal which has just gone completely out the window. I am
Yeah.
very heavily considering just offloading my entire cartridge collection, which is not very big,
Mhm.
and just putting them all in a RetroPie, because I have one now. So it's like, why bother? I can have them all at 60 hertz.
Yeah, yeah.
In terms of things to collect in the future, well, future gens, a lot of games are reliant on patches. Who knows how
Mhm.
long on console they'll be available? So that
I'm
makes me a
already
little,
worried about, like, PlayStation 3. Like, Xbox, I'm a bit more confident that will be around because, the backwards compatibility stuff.
and it's more hackable. So that stuff is probably going to be out there pretty soon. But already on the original Xbox, one of my favorite games on the original Xbox that I got relatively early in my collecting, I think before I even
Mhm.
had 10 Xbox games, was Crimson Skies. Crimson Skies is a brilliant game, especially brilliant multiplayer game.
Mhm.
Almost any time I've given that, even if this person doesn't play games at all, I put the controller in their hand. The controllers are just that intuitive; they get it immediately, and
Mhm.
it's a flying game, so that's impressive. Already, that game released DLC. There was a couple extra maps, a couple extra planes.
Mhm.
I can't find that DLC for love nor money online.
Yeah.
So this game I really like. Chunk of content can never have. Same thing with Halo 2. They released most of the maps on the map pack, like the disc, but then they released another pack, and you can't get that anymore. I mean, I'm sure Halo 2, you could hack that on relatively easy because it's Halo 2, but
Yeah.
already from even the 6th generation, where like content has started losing. So in terms of future gens, no.
This kind of thing with these older consoles is that, we've seen these losses already from these things, but they've been minor issues, like little pieces of content here and there. Nobody cared about WiiWare. I mean, obviously, WiiWare is very well categorized. Like if you go down the piracy route,
But now you've got stuff like Tony Hawk Pro Skater 5, where like, the only thing you can collect is the tutorial.
yeah,
And even then,
yeah,
that's broken because the rest is a patch which they can't distribute anymore.
yeah. But I mean, like once the PlayStation Network stops supporting PS3, like every game you're gonna, if you buy a new game or a used game, I guess,
Yeah.
for the PlayStation 3, you're not gonna be able to patch it. You're gonna be running the 1.0 version of game sometimes. It's not as big of an issue on PS3, but games were patched pretty regularly.
With the 360, like I'm a huge Meatloaf fan of as in the singer. And I found out that Paradise by the Dashboard Light was DLC on
Mm,
a Rock Band game or a Guitar Hero game. It was one of the two
yeah.
on the PS3 or the 360, one of the two. And so I thought, oh, okay, well, I'll buy that DLC. Sure. I went and do that. Online DLC, the storefronts completely just not working, non functional, gone.
Mm.
And like, yeah, like with these games that are more built around DLC, like, that's going to be the reality going forward.
And with this generation, PS4, Xbox One, and things, there are many games that just straight up won't work without a network connection, or like the Tony Hawk 5 situation where it's like, here's the tutorial on a disc, the rest of the game is not there.
Or the Spyro Reignited situation.
Yeah, it's just the first game, right?
Best game is the only one on the disc or the cartridge. So yeah, in terms of future stuff, not going to collect that. Now, I would like to get more into handheld, like
Mm-hmm.
GBA, Game Boy. Those are always going to be relatively cheap because they're not as much in the public eye. They've been rising a
Gotcha.
little bit, but even then,
Mm.
Pokemon has started to go down, and when Pokemon starts to go down, the market's going down. Um, but yeah, so I'm interested in that. However, that said, PSP recently has become so cheap that I have bought so much that like I just don't have anywhere to store all the. I don't have a shelf big enough to store
Yeah.
all my PSP games. So yeah, because of that, I've been playing less handheld because again, sport for choice. Uh,
The
but
Vita, though, I'm gonna imagine that platform's gonna stay expensive.
ooh,
Like, they're before the Vita's even dead, there's a collector's market there.
Vita will be very interesting because it was a system that died even before the end of the generation, but games were still coming out on it, like limited run and that. I would love to collect Vita, but I think Vita's going to be the next GameCube, almost
Yeah,
definitely. I don't see those prices coming down.
yeah.
It's gonna be stuff like the high end GameCube, the high end Wii, the stuff that's just gonna
Mhm.
keep its value and it's never gonna drop. I mean, some stuff will obviously like
Yeah.
it, there's always going to be exceptions, Yeah, that's the main takeaway you should have from all this. There was always exceptions to the rule when it comes to
Mhm,
game collection.
mhm.
But yeah, some stuff like that. So yeah, I think in terms of collecting, I'm just gonna keep on buying the same kind of stuff that I'm buying. I'm just gonna eventually play through it, whittle away the excess, make videos about the good and the particularly bad stuff. And yeah, it's basically collecting. Now, with my YouTube channel, just quickly, how it ties into
Mhm.
collecting is I wanted the channel to be mostly about good games that people hadn't heard of.
Yeah.
And I think I've done, and of course, bad games where the material is there, but because I need to make them funny. But well, otherwise people aren't gonna watch. But I do like I try to make them funny, but I also go into the very technical aspects of the player experience,
Yeah.
and I try and combine the two in a way that I hope no one else is really doing. I like to think so, to give me a bit of a USP. But yeah, a lot of the time is like I'll put games aside because like, oh, I'm just gonna hold on to this video, make a review of it, and get rid of it. I'm actually looking at an entire tub worth of games like that. So my YouTube channel does drive that collecting. However, even that, like, there are so many YouTubers out there these days. A lot of these games, they've already been covered now.
Mhm.
That I started off with, like, okay, I'll put that aside, save that. Britney's Dance Beat, that was one that got covered. Metal Jesus Rocks. Like, I was gonna do a review of Snowboard Plug and Play, and I did.
Mhm.
That's my most recent video. And he did it while I was filming. It's like it was a friggin' Snowboard Plug and Play, and
Yeah.
even that's been covered. To this day, the only game that's actually well, two games really that have truly fit that bill of games people don't really know about but are good. Actually, no, three. There's
Mm,
Road Rage 3, which was a Phoenix game that's actually good.
mm.
There was Crash and Burn, which is a demolition derby game, but even then, that has its hardcore underground fan club group. And Xenocracy on PS1. That's a game which, to date, I am the only English review of. So yeah, that's the one I achieved, and it's so shit the video too, because it was like the first one I did.
And this is one thing that like what I do honestly is like I recently played through The Wizard of Oz Beyond the Yellow Brick Road for the DS, and somebody actually published a video about it about I think 4 months after I finished it.
As soon as you told me that game existed on Discord, I looked it up because I work at a Wizard of Oz themed premises, and yeah, that game is like 60-70 bucks over here.
So what I did is I went and watched that person's video, and I found I actually came to a different conclusion from them in terms of the game's mechanics and stuff. I think we generally felt the same about how the game is as a whole, but what I want to say about the game is very different. So I try. I don't just look for, hey, nobody's covered this game. I also try to make sure that what I'm if I do add to that conversation, I'm adding something that's valuable. And so that's something to keep in mind with that.
That situation is me and the rest of the world when it comes to Burnout 2.
Yeah.
It seems like everybody in the world can't stop raving about how every single Burnout game that's ever been made is good and brilliant and the pinnacle of racing
Mm.
games. But like Burnout 2, as far as I'm concerned, is absolute crap. And especially Burnout 1 as well, just a chore to try and play through. Like 3 and onwards, yeah, they're fine. As soon as Criterion took over from Acclaim, brilliant. But like the old ones, like I really do not like those, but everybody else loves those games. So I think I'm the only negative review on YouTube of Burnout 2.
I definitely have a negative review of Breath of the Wild on my YouTube, and I think it has the most dislikes of any video I've put out in the
Oh,
last 2 years.
that's a very divisive game, in the first place. But then again, Jim Sterling was the poster child for bad reviews of that game. Uh, Back in the old 7 out of 10.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Keith, and all that knowledge you have dumped on us in terms of like buying and selling. Like
Yeah.
like I said earlier, I don't do any of that stuff. So
Yeah, hopefully it
so
wasn't too rambly or anything.
well, there's a
Yeah.
lot to cover,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
I could
you're gonna have a big editing job ahead of you, I'm
that's
afraid.
fine. So like I do with every multi-tap podcast, I think I've finally decided that even though it's a generic name, I'm just going to call these multi-tap podcasts because it fits my website name.
I think it's a brilliant name, really. Brilliant idea, because, one controller port.
So like with that all these other multi-tap podcasts, basically I just want to give you like 5 minutes to plug a game that you're passionate about, or you just don't really get the chance to talk about normally.
Well, the game I'm going to talk about, I'm going to kind of break those rules you just talked about, but it's going to be entertaining. Don't worry. It's a game called Girl Zone on PS2.
I
Um,
think I know this game. Keep going.
then the joke is going to be halfway spoiled, but that's okay. All right, so tell me what you think about this game. I'm going to read a bit from the blurb before telling you anything about the game. I'm just going to read the blurb on the back. I don't know if this game did receive a US release.
Yeah, I think actually I might be wrong that I know it because I'm thinking of a PS1 game actually.
I think it was just PAL only.
Okay.
And I'm just going to read the blurb, and I'm going to stop at various points. You're going to tell me if you think this sounds like a game you'd be interested in trying out or not. And we're going to see if there's maybe a particular point where that opinion shifts.
Try ready? Me. I love I love my bad games.
Okay. I didn't say anything about the game's quality, but let's keep going.
Let's go.
Okay. Mia and Julie live in the future where traveling in deep space is the norm. Okay. Every planet has its own unique lifestyle, and the girls looking for adventures can easily find something fun to do. So how's that sound so far?
You know what's interesting? I can't even put my finger on what the genre would be at this point.
Yeah, but it sounds great. Traveling in deep space being the norm? That's crazy.
If I had to guess, it's a point-and-click adventure game in some way.
Okay, but it sounds interesting at this point, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and when I was looking at this game, I was reading along. I was like, "Wow, that actually sounds pretty impressive. It was cool." Like the cover is actually quite colorful, as are the screenshots. Mm-hmm. But anyway, keep going. Veggies, fun to do. Okay, since Mia and Julie are always in an adventure mood, they travel a lot and often get into peculiar situations. So yeah, it sounds like sort of an adventure game. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So you feeling positive on this?
Feeling good. Keep going.
Okay. Here's the next sentence. Girl Zone consists of 10 minigames. When you complete all 10 games, you will unlock one bonus game. End of blurb. Still feeling positive on it?
Well, I will say I do enjoy my minigame collections, so I'm still I'm still good.
But I've never seen any game okay, you're like the one person who's not done that then, but I've never had a game where I was going, yeah, this is good. Okay, traveling deep space, 10 mini games. When you complete 10, you will unlock one bonus game.
I will say that's a very direct thing to say on your box.
It is, and that is the exact quote that I have there. Now, PAL collectors will know what I mean when I say this is a Phoenix game.
Okay.
And if I'd said that beforehand, they would have gone, oh, of course. Phoenix is a notoriously crappy budget publisher in the PAL regions. It's ridiculous. But yes, I haven't actually played this game yet because I want it to be fresh when I write the script to eventually review this. But even if this is okay, so it's called Girl Zone, obviously directed at young girls. Game for girls.
I love my games for girls. So
there are some interesting ones in the bunch there. Powerpuff Girls has a couple of that.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Now, what really kills this game for me is this is a mini game collection, right? For girls, notoriously social young creatures.
Yes.
One player only. Seriously. So this is 10 single player mini games from the worst publisher on the entire system. It's on a compact disc instead of a DVD, which tells you a lot of what you need to know about what kind of quality you're going to have. And and the save file is 56 kilobyte, which is one of the smallest I've ever seen.
Tiny.
That is tiny for PS2. So this is a game I've actually got multiple copies of this in my collection because believe it or not, it has cover variants.
Okay.
Yeah, it actually has two completely different colors for the Australian market alone.
Weird.
I don't know why. Yeah, of all the games, because cover variants were not common on the PS2 area. But this one just straight out, and it's completely different. The two of them.
So Phoenix is the publisher, you said?
Phoenix Games, yes.
Did they develop it as well, or did they just bring it out?
No, they may have developed it.
Okay.
But they generally worked with other really, really crap. Have you ever heard of the games like Snow White and the Seven Clever Boys or Dalmatians 3 or any of those?
Not those in particular, but maybe like Ninja Breadman 2 or something like that. If you're familiar with that.
We are way below. Ninja Breadman is a functioning game.
Okay.
Phoenix doesn't do that very often. There's only one game they've ever made which I consider good, or published which I consider good, and that is Road Rage 3, which is a port of, well, not a port, but a translation of the Japanese Togue 3, which is a racing game developed by Cave,
Mhm.
which is a very niche but very solid racing game in its own right. That's the only game they've ever put out which is anything nearing
Yeah.
decent. Everything else they make is just bottom of the barrel trash. If you want to see some of the games they made, you can watch my Christmas special from about 2 years ago,
Mhm.
where I reviewed 12 games of Christmas, 12 bad games that I just wanted out of my house and out of my life. So I wanted to get 12 done at once and get them done.
One thing you mentioned there, like a lot of these publishers will just put out like Japanese games and they look awful. But like I've started buying Imagine games from Ubisoft because a lot of them are
Oh,
Japanese
yeah.
made games that are actually, if you're into like
Oh, really?
Princess Debut and stuff like that.
That makes
Um,
sense. Now, I do know that the Imagine games are a real mixed bag. Like some
yes.
of them absolute trash, like the Bachelor games.
Mhm, mhm.
Some of them, like the detective one. I think Tamashi Hikora on YouTube, who's in the same sort of circle as Jaywitz and all that. She has done some brilliant videos on looking at games for girls or games that were marketed towards child girls, and she did one on the Imagine series, and there is a huge spectrum of the quality of some of
Mhm.
those games because they were just had the Imagine label slapped on them. They were already mostly pre-existing.
Well, cool. Thank you so much for bringing that game. I'll need to look into it and see if it's see if it's something, or whenever you do a video on it, I'll definitely get that information there.
Oh, one of these days, one of these days.
So, like we've mentioned a few times here, you're mainly a YouTuber. What kind of content do you have coming up? What kind of content do you focus on?
Well, yeah, my channel is Keith Shizuo. It's got that name because I've tried many times to think of a better and easier to spell one, and all attempts have been fruitless. Spelt single word: KeithShizuo. And of course, I am Australian, so it's Z and not Z.
Yeah, yeah,
If any Americans are confused there.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so well, what I like to consider my primary content being is retro game reviews, usually 5th and 6th gen. Of course, they haven't been coming out as often as I'd like recently.
The hard work.
I've had a number of medical things and stuff that's kept me from going full on, as well as my big project from last year was actually a musical review because I do like doing song parodies when I can. I did one on the release of the Switch called, which was a parody of the Disney song Hellfire, which is based on a lifelong Xbox fan being tempted over by the allure of the Switch. And yeah, I've done a couple others, but the main one I did last year was a musical review of Resident Evil 4 to the song Bat Out of Hell with a full accompanying music video, which is the first time I've ever tried to do one of those. And editing that thing to get it out by Halloween was so exhausting that I decided not to start any new projects at all for the rest of the year.
And I'll say what's really fascinating about that particular video is that you do have to do a review.
Oh yes, no, that's exactly what I wanted to do. Yeah, because people have like done songs in the game reviews before, like as little funny like tack on bits. Bat Out of Hell is long enough. I really love this song. I want to see if I can put the review in the song because the logic was that Resident Evil 4 is a game that we know so much about.
Yeah.
Um, when I was looking for research for this video, I found a video comparing the text fonts and recreating them that are used in games. Like people have picked this game apart. Everything that could have possibly been said about this game had already been said. So I'm
Yeah,
like, well, if I ever want to talk about this game, the only way I can do it is to just say it louder.
mhm.
So, Bat Out of Hell, the most awesome song ever written, with Resident Evil 4, what many people argue, the best game ever made. So, yeah, combine those two. So, yeah, that was good. I also do more traditional video game reviews. I'd kind of describe myself as maybe a slightly more technically minded Kadikarus
Mhm.
or Jontron, that sort of thing. I most of the people I watch are the more funny, explosive types.
Yeah.
But I do like to go more into the technical nitty gritty of the player experience. So yeah, I've got about 20 of those reviews up. I'm in the middle of season 2 at the moment. My next video is going to be on a PS1 gun game called Mighty Hit Special,
Okay.
which is not a very good gun game. Yeah. And as I said before, I do like to try and review mostly good games, so it's mostly going to be upbeat, not just yelling at crap. But, every so often I will.
And you also started like combining your game pickups videos with your streams lately, right? That's what you've been.
Yes. Now, as we talked about before, I do a game pickup series. I try to do it every week.
Mhm.
The main idea was near the end of 2018, I'd started buying a lot more volume of video games than I did because I had more disposable income and I have just more opportunities to get out and look for them and
Mhm.
more cheap places around. So I decided, okay, might as well document this. I was keeping track of the total amount spent until about 6 months into last year.
Yeah.
Um, at that point, I just like I can't be bothered doing the math anymore because not many people were watching the videos. But recently, yeah, I just want to stream more. I want
Yeah.
to try and see if there are people who watch my channel who are interested in me streaming. So like those videos are a good excuse for me to get on the stream, so I will, and I'll talk with whoever's in the chat. If people hang around by the end of them, yeah, I might play some games or do some editing or something. But and I would like to do more just games or episode editing streams,
Yeah.
but it's a matter of whether or not people are watching because I've only got about what 400 subscribers, something like that.
More than me. One thing I do want to say about your pickup videos too is that what I think are unique about your videos and why I've kind of praised them quite a bit is you learn a lot about the value of games. And you always discuss, how much you're buying it for, how much you're selling it for. Even if you don't give exact, you generally say, I picked this up because I identified this as being potentially valuable. So if you want to, I think if you want to learn to get that eye to some extent, that watching your pickups videos is valuable for that.
Well, that's interesting because I consider me buying a game just to resell to be like the most boring part of the video. First, people was like, "Oh yeah, I bought this game. I'm gonna sell it. Yeah, whatever."
Yeah.
So that's interesting to hear that you like hearing about the videos. I have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, also a segment that I used to promote a lot more than I did
Mhm.
before is because a couple people ended up taking advantage of, but not really. Is that if you send me pictures of your week's pickup, either via Twitter or on my Discord,
Mhm.
and you tell me how much you paid for it, I'll put that in the video and I'll critique and say, "Hey, good job, you got some good deals there." So if you are interested on doing that, like, yeah, join my Discord or follow me on Twitter, and you can, yeah, just send me a picture of your pickup, tell me what you paid for it, and I'll feature you and potentially, if you have one, your channel on my pickup videos. So that's all good.
I'll put the relevant links in the description for your YouTube channel, the videos we've talked about, and then also Discord and things like that too. So,
Yes, I do have a Patreon as well. I am because I'm very small and people rarely interact with it. I really don't post that much updates anymore.
mhm,
If
mhm.
if if more people were interested and they expressed an interest, I would do that more. But if you would like to throw me if you throw me $1, then that's more than you'll ever give me in terms of AdSense money
Yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever that. So like, yeah, if you'd like to support me that way as well, you can do that. So yes, there's my eBay store as well. If you want to, I always try to post stuff. Like when I sell stuff, I make it. Now here's another selling tip. I forgot to mention.
Mhm,
I always list stuff at as the lowest price for a comparable condition of that game online,
mhm.
because at the end of the day, you don't want stock sitting around in your house in a
Yeah.
box. You want that to buy it in out the door. It's like bird in the hand's worth two in the bush. So yeah, I always try and post it as the lowest uh, available game in Australia. So yeah, if you want some stuff, hit me up my eBay store. That is Shizuo 340.
Thank you so much, Keith, for your time. Per usual, you just go to oneshoport.com. You can see all the latest updates there. Speaking a little bit about games for girls, if they're interested in that, last month I posted a Tokadol video, which is basically a Japanese arcade game that's all about like dressing these dolls, and it's like an RPG rhythm game. It's this very unique game that I played in Japan. So that video is up on the website. Podcasts go up every Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific time, and then I stream every Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific time as well.
Thanks for having me. Hope to be on here again sometime.
And I hope all of you listening have a great week. Bye.
Happy hunting.